If you thought that Satanists only exist in horror stories and urban legends, then I'm about to surprise you. Today you will hear stories about real cases of devil worship, ritual sacrifices, orgies, not to mention people who fancied themselves as vampires and drank human blood. Interested? Then make yourself comfortable. We're starting. Family devil worship. There's a saying, husband and wife are one Satan, but you have no idea how true it sometimes is. Olga Vark and Andrei Tregubenko are a Moscow couple who, on the surface, seem no different from the rest. But in the spring of 2021, they confessed to horrific murders and ritual sacrifices. And as if that wasn't enough, they also engaged in cannibalism. For Andrei, it all started with an interest in the occult. He studied shamanism, rituals, read tarot cards, and believed he possessed a magical gift. Soon sacrifices began, during which at that time only animals suffered. Mostly, black roosters were the ones to be slaughtered. Serious discussions that Andrei initiated in thematic circles about murders in the name of devil worship repelled, believe it or not, other adherents of Satanism. But still, not everyone was repelled. Olga, who felt a closeness to the realm of Lucifer, was intrigued by Andrei's words. They didn't just believe in Satan, they served him. Their lives turned into a search for victims who could become offerings to their dark lord. They believed that through the pain and suffering of others, they could receive the blessing of darkness. The couple's first victim was a girl who was in love with Andrei. He invited her on a hike and she couldn't refuse. Her throat would be slit and she would be buried after performing a strange ritual and reciting a spell. Andrei would post a photo on social media with a bonfire and a pot. In it, apparently, was the girl's thigh. The second victim was a guy whom Olga had known before. A well-rehearsed scheme, the offer to go on a hike, was actually a desire to lure the person deeper into deserted places where they couldn't expect any help. The guy was hit on the head and had his throat slit after some strange invocations were recited, which meant something in the fevered minds of the Satanists. Cannibalism was also not forgotten. In satanic circles, the couple did not hesitate to boast about their crimes. It is quite possible that many more people suffered at their hands than the investigation was able to prove. Olga Vark and Andrei Tregubenko were sentenced to long prison terms. Prison cells became their new temple, but fortunately without rituals and sacrifices. They left their two little daughters behind. What will happen to them next and how their parents' crimes will affect their fate, only God knows. Vampires from Germany. In August 2000, Daniel, a young man with unusual tastes, decided to find his other half. But not just any girl, a true princess of darkness. To do this, he placed an ad in the German Gothic magazine Heavy Metal. A black vampire is looking for a princess of darkness who hates everyone and everything. This unusual call was answered by 23-year-old Manuela. Thus began the story of one of the creepiest couples in Germany. From the first meeting, they realized that something more than just attraction connected them. Both were fanatically devoted to the cult of Satan and obsessed with vampires. Their style was dark and provocative. Black clothing, inverted crosses, and Manuela had one side of her head shaved and sharp fangs, which she had specially inserted instead of crowns. They were like characters from a horror movie. But their story turned out to be much scarier. After getting married, the couple turned their apartment into a true abode of darkness. The walls and ceiling were painted black, inverted crosses hung everywhere, and instead of beds, there were carved oak coffins. The interior was complemented by plastic skulls, knives, and axes. With each passing day, their fanaticism and thirst for violence only grew. Daniel and Manuela eagerly posed for sadomasochistic magazines, and their intimate life was full of extreme experiments. They inflicted wounds on each other, drank blood, and slept on fresh graves. Manuela loved to be photographed, bloodied, in chains, and holding a machete. Everything changed in March 2001, when, according to them, they received order number 1667 from Satan himself. In the language of the occult, this meant the necessity to make a sacrifice. The choice fell on 33-year-old Frank Magdalena, a colleague of Daniel and his only friend. Frank was invited over under the pretext of a friendly gathering. After a few bottles of beer and some conversation, he was offered to read the book, The Life of Satan. While Frank was engrossed in reading, Daniel struck him on the head with a hammer. Then the couple together inflicted numerous knife wounds. After drinking the blood, they calmly had sex in one of their coffins, leaving Frank's body lying next to them. A pentagram was carved on the victim's chest, and on the window glass, written in blood, was, "If Satan lives." During a search of the apartment, the police discovered an impressive list of potential future victims. On January 10, 2002, the trial of Daniel, Emmanuel, and Ruth began. The Satanist couple showed not a hint of remorse. Their gazes, full of hatred and contempt, frightened everyone present. Daniel stated, "Satan gave us the order. We just followed it." Daniel received 15 years in prison and Emanuela 13 years, with mandatory treatment in a closed psychiatric clinic. Fortunately, the couple ended up being separated for a long time. Who doesn't want to become a goddess? In the career of every self-respecting con artist, there comes a moment sooner or later when they consider creating a cult, the perfect tool for scaling their dirty business. In 1962, the brothers Caetano and Santos Hernandez were already in full swing. Engaged in theft and deception throughout Mexico, they stumbled upon a real treasure for any swindler. The mountain village of Yerba Buena, seemingly stuck into the past, the local residents, cut off from civilization, became easy prey for the brothers. The Hernandezes presented themselves as exiled gods of the Inca Empire, promising to reveal immense treasures hidden in the mountains in exchange for worship. A few simple tricks, which wouldn't impress even a child in the city, convinced the village commoners of the brothers' divinity. Within a few weeks, Cayetano and Santos had created their own cult, where voluntary donations coexisted with drug-fueled orgies involving almost all the local women. However, when the tricks and legends could no longer sustain the followers' faith, the brothers decided to raise the stakes. They found a new deity, the Aztec goddess of earth, fire, and death, mother of the stars and the moon. This goddess became a 16-year-old prostitute from Monterrey named Magdalena Solis. The girl who agreed to the role quickly realized that such an opportunity comes once in a lifetime, and she took control of the sect into her own hands. The first thing she did was order the execution of 2 sect members who dared to doubt her divinity. The execution was carried out with a brutality worthy of the ancient Aztecs and served as a warning to the others. Then Solis declared that as a goddess, she was obliged to drink human blood to maintain eternal youth. The blood was obtained through ritual killings. Magdalena would point to one of the followers, declare them unworthy, and watch as the victim was killed in the most torturous way. Human blood was mixed with chicken blood, spiced with drugs, and served to the goddess, and at the end of the ritual, the heart was torn from the victim's chest. These monstrous rituals continued for just over a month until a local teenager and an officer went missing in the village. Their bloodless bodies were discovered by police and military who went to storm the village. The cult members, who were under the influence of drugs, desperately resisted the police. Those who had not yet been sacrificed were killed during the assault. Santos Hernandez died in the shootout, and Caetano was killed by one of the cult members who decided to eat him to gain divine power. It seems that didn't help him. Magdalena Solis was captured alive. She was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and her term was supposed to end in 2013. However, nothing is known about her subsequent fate. We can only hope that her second coming never happens. Teenage fascination. 2008, Yaroslavl. Nikolai has long been interested in metal music, black clothing with skulls, and the Gothic subculture. Together with his friends, he often spends time at the cemetery. The mother views all of this as just another teenage phase. Perhaps it was worth raising the alarm back when Nikolai became interested in Satanism and started sacrificing animals. In the early 2000s, goths, emos, and other dark subcultures were very popular. But of course, not all of them. Teenagers in black clothing became murderers. In the group of Satanists that Nikolai was part of, there were several other guys with striking pseudonyms. Phantom, that Dr. God Chiara. Initially, they conducted rituals using animal blood only for the initiation of newcomers. In the wasteland, they set up an inverted cross to which they tied animal corpses, and nearby they lit bonfires. But very soon, this was not enough for them. They wanted to try sacrificing a human. Girls named Olia and Anya joined the sect. They became the first victims. Anya was in love with one of the group members. From the first story told in this video, you know where such dangerous love can lead. Through emotional manipulation, they lured the girls into the sect, but hid their satanic nature until the very end. On the evening of June 28, 2008, the sect members and the girls gathered at Nikolai's apartment. The victims were given drinks and taken to the ritual clearing. The Satanists formed a pentagram shape, and in its center, they lit a bonfire. On a signal, the entire group attacked the girls and stabbed them with daggers. Then the teenagers washed themselves with the victims' blood and even took photos with the bodies on their phones. It's better not to mention the horrifying cannibalism. The remains were buried not far away. Sometime later, the teenagers killed 3 more of their acquaintances in the same manner at the same clearing. According to witness testimonies during the murders, Nikolai counted the blows out loud, and the number once reached 666. There was also an infernal secretary in the group. He made a book of the dead from the victim's skin, where he recorded the murders. These records later became one of the pieces of evidence. At that time, the parents of the missing teenagers thought their children were having fun at the rock festival Invasion. When the kids didn't return home, the adults raised the alarm and contacted the police. The authorities quickly identified the Satanists, but they denied knowing each other. They erased the numbers from their phones, but continued to communicate nonetheless. They were so cunning that in hopes of confusing the investigation, they communicated with each other using messages written backwards. It's even strange that this didn't help. Group or sect? Italy, 2004. The headlines of all the country's newspapers are dedicated to one event. Participants were arrested in Milan, either of a music band or a satanic cult. In 2006, the Italian police even created a special team, the Satan Squad, to determine how many people actually fell victim to this group. In the end, although most of the crimes remained unproven, they settled on the number 15. The crimes began in the winter of 1998 and were associated with the group Beasts of Satan, the Milan Club Midnight, where informal youth gathered, as well as the musician and group leader Andrea Volpe. On the night of January 18th, after a party at the club, a young couple disappeared, 16-year-old bassist of the band Fabio and his 19-year-old girlfriend Chiara. Law enforcement assumed that the teenagers had run away, but Fabio's father, Michel, sensed something was wrong. When the young people did not return home after a day, he began his own investigation. He placed ads in themed press, looking for people who knew his son and could provide leads. For 5 years, he meticulously documented all his clues. During this time, he got to know all the metal fans in northern Italy who had ever met his son. So, what really happened? The band's leader, Andrea Volpe, and his company went to the woods in the suburbs of Milan after the club. Fabio and Chiara, who were missing, were with them. There they gathered in a ritual circle, drank and took drugs. Then, Andrea Volpe announced that the devil needed a sacrifice and pointed to Chiara. The motivation was simple. She outwardly resembled the girl Maria. Fabio naturally stood up for his friend, but it led to nothing. The girl was stabbed with a knife piercing her heart, and the boy was beaten to death with a hammer. Completing the ritual, chestnut leaves were stuffed into their throats, a cigarette was dipped in blood and smoked in turn, declaring that the couple would now turn into zombies. The bodies were buried, and they danced on the grave, laughing and shouting, "Now you are zombies. Try to get out of this hole if you dare." Similar events occurred during every midnight ritual. The father of the missing Fabio recalls with a tremor in his voice, "I began to immerse myself in the city's metal subculture, going to clubs, meeting many people, fans of heavy music. And as it turned out, years later, some of them were the murderers of my son." The truth was revealed thanks to another crime. In January 2004, the man heard on the news about the brutal murder of 27-year-old Mariangela Pezzotta. She was buried alive in a greenhouse in the town of Golaseca. The former boyfriend of the victim, Andrea Volpe, fell under suspicion. During the interrogation, Volpe confessed to the murder of Mariangela. He also admitted to the murders of Fabio Tollis, Chiara Marino, and his former girlfriend Magdalena Russo, who was sacrificed on a Friday, as you guessed, precisely on the 13th. During the interrogations, he revealed that Mariangela was killed because she knew about the beast's affairs. Too much. Volpe invited her to dinner, but when he attacked her, a fight broke out. The girl resisted, and then he shot her in the mouth with a gun. A .38 caliber. She was in agony for a long time before she died. Volpe also showed the place where the bodies of Fabio and Chiara were buried. In addition, the sect members confessed that they drove their drummer Andrea Bantadia to suicide, as he refused to participate in the murders. The Beasts of Satan were suspected of being involved in another 14 unsolved murders and disappearances. Among them were the disappearance of a former band member, the hanging of Volpe's 25-year-old girlfriend, the burning at the cemetery of the caretaker and friend of the Beasts of Satan, Andrea Lombardo, and much, much more. The sect leader, Andrea Volpe, was sentenced to 30 years in prison. It seems that all members of his group received sentences. The stories I told today are not just scary tales or plots for horror movies. These are real events that occurred in different parts of the world. People obsessed with the ideas of devil worship committed monstrous crimes, sacrificing the innocent, believing it would grant them power, authority, or immortality. These stories make us ponder what lies behind the mask of normalcy. How often do we pass by those who have already plunged into the abyss of darkness but have not yet taken the final step? And most importantly, how do we protect ourselves and our loved ones from this darkness? Ritual murders, satanic cults, devil worship, these are not just crimes. It is a challenge to society, to humanity, to life itself. But as history shows, darkness always catches up with those who serve it. Let these stories remain. For us, just a reminder that even in the darkest corner of the world, there is always room for light. Thank you for being with us. Remember, the world is full of mysteries, but it is we who choose which path to take, toward the light or into the darkness. Stay with us to learn more about the most eerie and incredible stories that our reality hides. Subscribe, like, and share this video if you found it interesting. And remember, darkness fears the light,